That, ladies and gentlemen, comes to us courtesy of the album Stony Hill from Damian Jr. Gong Marley, along with some additional vocals from his brother Stephen. The song is called Perfect Picture, and that is our lead-in for the beginning of this week's edition of Reelblack Radio. Mike Dennis is in the house. How you be?
Hey, Steph. You're looking great with the lipstick.
Thank you. It is Fenty Beauty Clapback for those of you who like to take a note of such things.
Clapback?
Clapback,
okay.
Yes.
That's yeah, you style, for those who don't know, you style every day. You have a different makeup design on your Instagram.
I try, I would love to get endorsed by Fenty. I don't have a big enough profile yet for Rihanna to actually bring me on as an endorser.
Now, is that the thing? Did you just completely get rid of the MAC cosmetics for Fenty?
No. I just happen to love how Rihanna embraces color.
You see how I did that, right? That makes me really sensitive.
Did I get rid of my MAC? No.
Yes,
my caboodle overfloweth with all different kinds of brands. But this opportunity that we have to talk about stories that incorporate visuals maybe from a different perspective than we normally do.
Without question. Today's episode is going to be super great.
Yes.
And we have somebody on the line already. We just jump right in, right?
Indeed. So, we talk about visuals from the film perspective, and this first film and the first, guest that we have in today's segment is telling us about a film that's about portraits.
Indeed.
And that has a local connection as well. So we are welcoming Karen Smiles of WHYY on our airwaves today. Good afternoon, Karen. How are you?
I'm fine, and thanks, Stephanie, for having me on and giving me the opportunity to talk about this film.
Well, we love stories that have local connections, and in particular, a lot of us see Cheltenham as just across the way from us here in Philadelphia, and so many parallels and the challenges that they are experiencing in contemporary times have to do with the changing demographics and dynamics, and people may not be aware of the deep-rooted African-American history that exists in that township, and this film helps to bring that to light through the story of these portraits.
You're so right, Stephanie. But you know what? As a resident of Cheltenham Township, I can tell you that Cheltenham is still a great place to be, and it's still one of the few truly diverse communities on the outskirts of Philadelphia. So I'd say things are good in Cheltenham. And especially, you're right, because this story is very much about Cheltenham history.
Right, and when we're talking about the new film, The Montiers, an American story, which is going to be just broadcast for the first time.
That's right. The Montiers, an American story, is going to be broadcast tonight for the very first time at 8:30 p.m. on WHYY TV. So we're real excited about that.
Yes, indeed. So kind of give us an overview. I know that there are going to be a lot of people who will want to tune in after our conversation today, but just give some perspective on the significance of the oldest surviving pair of portraits of an African-American couple. I mean, that's a significant achievement, and it relates us right back to our local history.
You're right. Stephanie, this story has so many ties to Philadelphia, in addition to the portraits. But the portraits of Hiram and Elizabeth Montier are just stunning. And they were done in 1841, and as you said, it's felt that they are the earliest known portraits of African Americans that put African Americans in the light that these portraits are in. Because, of course, they're pretty lavish, and African Americans in that time period just could not afford, number one, to have portraits like that done, and number two, even if they could, it was hard to even find someone that would allow you to sit for portraits of that caliber. So these portraits came on loan back in 2009 to the Philadelphia Museum of Art from Patricia and William Pickens, who are from New York. The Pickens decided to donate the portraits back then in honor of President Barack Obama's inauguration.
Nice.
They kind of saw it as a tribute to one man who has interracial roots, and the Montier family, which of course begins with interracial roots right here in the city of Philadelphia. So to kind of set that up for you, the Montier family, unlike most African American families, unfortunately, a lot of us cannot trace our histories back very far.
Mm-hmm.
The Montiers can trace their history all the way back to 1691.
Wow.
1691. We're talking about with the very first mayor of Philadelphia, Humphrey Morrey. So Humphrey Morrey was appointed mayor by William Penn. And like William Penn, he was a Quaker. And they were fleeing religious persecution in England as Quakers. Morrey served as mayor for 10 years. So Humphrey Morrey's son, Richard Morrey, he inherits Humphrey's estate when he passes away.
Mm-hmm.
And he frees he frees all of their servants. And one of the servants, Cremona Morrey, stays on in the household as a servant. And Richard and Cremona fall in love. Remember, we're talking about the early 1700s by this point.
Mm-hmm.
So the first mayor of Philadelphia's son falls in love with one of their servants and decides that he's going to marry her. Of course, it was not a marriage in the traditional sense because a white man could not marry a black woman.
Right.
Right. But they did live as man and wife, and she took his name, and she became Cremona Morrey. They set up a home in Cheltenham, the Glenside section of Cheltenham,
mm-hmm.
and they had 5 children. So that kind of begins the whole story. And how they got to Cheltenham is that Penn actually there were 15 people who came from England, land in Cheltenham. So this land was divided up between these 15 households, all of whom were Quakers. And this is how the Morrey family first comes to Cheltenham, Pennsylvania.
I think it's fascinating because we have a lot of folks who are very much into being able to claim our history in this country, but it is so deeply tied to enslavement. And, a lot of people regrettably do not know, as you mentioned, enough about their own personal lineage to know any alternative narrative as it relates to how their families came to be, how they developed, how they settled in this area. And so this film is really going to offer a vastly different perspective about the accumulation of wealth, about the establishment of family, even in direct contrast to what was legally on the books before our country was even formed.
You're right. You're talking about a real, a very long time ago. And it's largely, you're right. This is a family that was basically free from the early 1700s on. And the reason that this story has been documented is because, unlike many of us, William Pickens III, his family did a very good job of holding on to documents and photos and making sure that these materials were passed down through generations, which is pretty rare. A lot of us, we go and we clean out our aunt's house or, our parents' homes or our grandparents' homes, and we throw things out. And we don't realize that these may be very valuable things because they're very much a part of our history.
Yeah. Well, Gene, kudos to WHYY. I mean, this is really Philly history. I drive past the Morrey house, probably once a week. Right there on Limekiln Pike or whatever.
That's
so
right.
So to illuminate that part, and then at the same time for our listeners, dispel the fact that like so few of us really have a real direct connection to our past.
Right.
To have this film sort of dispel so many of the myths and reinforce a lot of our pre-existing beliefs. I mean, just talking about the romance between Cremona and the mayor's son.
Mm-hmm.
Richard, that's right. And I'm right there with you, because I too passed this house for many, many years, right there on Limestone Pike, and had no idea that, there was that type of history right there in Cheltenham. So, it's not just, you have this relationship to the mayor of Philadelphia in 1691. You then have the fact that Cremona was probably the wealthiest African-American woman at the time to have inherited this 198 acres. You have the home that, as you said, still stands in Glenside. And not only that, but there was an original structure, a barn structure, which was just a two-story home, which still stands as well behind the main home. Mm. This was the home that was built by Cremona Jr. And her husband, and they built this home while they lived in this home while they were building the home that stands in front of it.
Right.
So you actually have two historical structures there in Cheltenham. Now, both have been added on to and renovated, but for the most part, you still have the initial structures of both of these homes. And that in itself is just incredible.
No, it's fantastic. Now, I know tonight's screening at 8:30 on WHYY is just a piece of what's been going on this week. I know there was a premiere at the museum where the paintings stand, and then there was also something going on yesterday, correct?
Yeah, that's been really exciting. I have always known that this story was incredible, but I really had no idea how the city of Philadelphia and the people of Philadelphia were going to embrace the story of the Montier family. It kicked off on Wednesday with a fantastic event at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, where we probably had a few hundred people come out for the premiere screening, as well as an event where some Montier members actually showed up at a reception beforehand.
Beautiful.
And had the opportunity to actually meet each other for the first time. So, I've actually been getting emails and calls from people who are saying, "Hey, I'm a Montier, and I'm just excited to be able to make this connection to possible family members."
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so that was really very cool. And then yesterday, of course, in City Hall, City Council gave the family a resolution that was put forth by Councilman Derek Green. And there were probably about 25 family members there. One was from as far away as Brussels.
Wow.
That's how exciting the family was to be there. And that was just really fantastic to see this strong, prosperous, early African-American Philadelphia family be honored in that way. And, of course, for us here at WHYY, it all kind of, as the excitement builds, it's with the premiere of the program this evening at 8:30 p.m. on WHYY TV.
Well, one of the other things that before we let you go that I want to emphasize is the importance of the portraiture, because before it became common practice for us to be able to go to the strip mall and sit down and take photographs, portraiture was the way that we honored our ancestors. That, as you mentioned, when you overcome the financial aspects of what it takes to pay for a sitting, but this was the way that we captured the images of our ancestors and put it forth. And I have a funny story from even my own family with my great grandmother. The fact that there was a portrait, she couldn't sit for it for whatever reason, because as times were, but they took a photograph and created a portrait from the photograph, and because it was a de rigueur for her to have a bare neck in the photo, whatever she was wearing in the photo that they were using to create the portrait, the portrait artist added a high neck collar and pearls so that she would be befitting of this final piece that he was creating. And so there's also stories in that about class, about expectations, about the way that we were supposed to be presented to society that is also captured in this story.
And you're so right, and I just want to make this last point based on what you're saying. The other night, Gwendolyn Du Bois Shaw, who is an art history professor at the University of Pennsylvania, was on our panel, and she did a great job of comparing the portraits of Hiram and Elizabeth to those of Michelle and Barack Obama.
Mm-hmm.
Look how far we've come.
Yeah.
We have these beautiful portraits of Hiram and Elizabeth Montier, and then we have these beautiful portraits of Michelle and Barack Obama that we all just received, and how they differ, and the fact that people now have both of these sets of portraits,
yes,
as part of our history.
Yes.
And that young people really need to see these portraits and understand that there were black people who, at a time, were living this type of lifestyle. We were not all servants at that time. There were free people, African-American people, and especially here in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Without question, yeah.
And just beautiful way to connect local history with cultural history and present it in a bite-sized nugget for folks to be able to sit in front of their television sets tonight and learn this information and hopefully continue to discuss it. That there are so many different ways that our families contributed to the history of this nation even before we were a nation. And this film really captures that in a beautiful way with the local ties in particular. So we thank you for making time for us this morning to encourage our listening audience to check out the Montiers, an American Story, tonight at 8:30 p.m. And we hope that we will continue this partnership with WHYY to remind people about why public television is so important and to be able to have an insight into these wonderful stories.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. We certainly appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you. And so again, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, 8:30 p.m. on WHYY Channel 12 or whatever your paid television service might have as the channel, the Montiers, an American Story will air. And we're going to continue with this notion of documentary films.
And breaking conventional perceptions,
yes,
of who we are and what we're entitled to. I mean, I love the fact that the Montiers, Cremona, not only the mayor and William Penn were both slave owners.
Yes.
But they were all freed at a certain point, and Cremona not only married this man, but he honored her by giving her all the land.
First of all, 198 acres.
Every time I drive past that wall, I'm like, hey, that was some black owned at one point.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, it's something very, very special. I think people should check it out for sure, because you'll recognize if you're from the northwest part of the city, you'll recognize all the landmarks, and then there's so much information there, and for every viewer to read into it and connect their own family history to it, I think is a great thing.
Absolutely. And our next guest after this break, so many of us within the black community, I'm not one of them because I didn't have any misconceptions about what my lineage is, but we romanticize having a connection to our indigenous brothers and sisters or cousins. And whether that makes people feel differently about enslavement or our history in this nation, there are some stark realities of even what our indigenous brothers and sisters went through in order to try and prosper after this nation was taken over by colonizers. And so the deeper conversation about what is owed us and how you have to fight to get it is incorporated in the film 100 Years. And we're going to talk to that film's director when we return on this week's edition of Real Black Radio here on Word Radio. Stay tuned. From her one and only album that, listen, I have followed this woman's career through A Different World to a stellium of voices for animated series, but this album was brilliant, executive produced by Lenny Kravitz, but it also, this song in particular is one of the ones that, you know, just pulls at my heartstrings, because we spend a lot of time, particularly in the Black community, sort of policing identity about who is allowed in, who's allowed to claim Black, and who is allowed to profit off of Black culture. Cree Summer is biracial, Black and white, but was raised on an Indian reservation in Canada. And so the idea that she was welcomed into that community, that she was given, the fact that she's named Cree Summer is part of is part of her identity.
Yes.
Raised on a Cree reservation, and how that manifests itself with her. But the idea of being in council with the village elders and being given her Native American name as a part of that culture, and wanting to represent some of those principles in the way that she has lived her life, in the way that she is now mothering her own children, to me is very, very significant, because the history of Indigenous peoples on this land is troubled. And it's nuanced, and there are so many people who want to grasp at it, who don't necessarily have the history as it was handed down through their oral history. Right. But the realities of what it meant to live as an Indigenous person on this land, and how the evolution of American government and our American practices have played themselves out in this land, is very troubled. And our next guest created a documentary that is following the life of a woman named Eloise Cobell, also known as Yellow Bird Woman, about how she fought against the U.S. government for denying Indigenous peoples in this country a right to money they earned, because they gave up space in order to allow the U.S. government.
Gave up. That's very kind.
Well, yeah,
That's a very kind.
That's part of the story. So how about we not talk about it, and we bring in Melinda Janko.
Give it up.
Yes, right. In order to tell us about her film 100 Years. Good afternoon, Melinda, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Stephanie, and thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, thank you for creating this blessing. This is information is power.
Yes.
And this movie, 100 Years, One Woman's Fight for Justice, is incredible.
Please, please set the stage for us about how you even came to know Eloise Cobell, and feel compelled to tell her story, because this is information that we do not talk about at all in our school curriculum, certainly, and know so little about in terms of the history of this nation.
Well, I will begin with the beginning, which was that I went looking for a story to tell in 2002, and I found this little article in Mother Jones magazine about the broken trust and Eloise Cobell's fight for justice. And I was appalled. I couldn't believe that today that Native Americans were being treated so harshly by the United States government. And I thought I was reading it wrong. I thought, this is a 19th century story. And then I read on further, and I realized, no, this is happening today. There are people that are living on oil and gas lands that are pumping 24/7 in lands that are managed by the United States government as their trustee. And they're living in abject poverty without running water or electricity. So I was appalled by it. But I'm non-native, so I had a lot of work to do. I'd never set foot on an Indian reservation. I didn't know any Native Americans. But I was so outraged that it really didn't matter. I just vowed to bring this story to the world. I wanted the world to know, not just my country, but the world to know about this gross malfeasance under the care of the United States government. So I was embarrassed by my government.
And the reason why I think this is so important is because, as I said, we're an independently owned Black talk radio station. And so some of the conversations that we have about alienation, about being denied access to living in certain communities and financially investing or reinvesting in our communities is so parallel to this story that I think it's incredibly important for our listening audience to know about the existence of this film and the real backstory as to why Eloise Cobell was compelled to go chase down these dollars that were rightfully owed to these folks.
Well, Eloise grew up like all Indian families. They grew up knowing there was something wrong. They would see the oil man come on and take the oil off their property, but then the checks were like for pennies on the dollar, if they got checks at all.
Right.
So Eloise heard the stories as a young child, and then she became the treasurer of the Blackfeet tribe. And so she started noticing these huge gaps in the accounting statements that oil companies were taking oil off the reservation, but they weren't paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
So she started calling her senators and congressmen and writing letters, and she actually started with the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And they told her that she didn't know how to read a statement. So then she felt kind of embarrassed and so she went and got her accounting degree. And then she became a banker.
Right.
And so under the first administration of President Bush Sr., she actually got a little bit of attention from Congress. They passed the Indian Trust Reform Act in 1994. And then 2 years went by. Nothing happened. Nothing changed. So she said, she drew a line in the sand, and she said, enough is enough. I'm not taking this anymore. And she sued the most powerful government in the world in 1996. She's going to be, she's a civil rights leader like, Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. She's going to go right down in the history books. And by the way, I'm very proud of the fact that we have 300 copies in the Montana public schools.
Mm.
And our goal is to get it in all the schools.
Right. And we talk about so often that the visual medium, and Mike, you've said this, that the visual medium is our new frontier in terms of how we're going to educate ourselves about the stories and the history that we have been denied in so many ways. It's not a textbook anymore.
I mean, there's no hiding anymore. If information is available to everyone at all times. So Melinda, I think this movie is a blessing. Just I know you spent a long time, 14 years, is it, to bring the story to us, and now it's going to be available. It was on PBS, and now it's coming to Netflix. Is that correct?
Yes, we just had our broadcast premiere on PBS on March 13th.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and by the way, they're streaming live for this week
on PBS.org.
World Channel.
Mm-hmm.
And the series is called America Reframed.
Okay.
And then on, I believe it's March the 21st, we'll be released on Netflix.
Yeah.
And that's for a 2-year run in the U.S.
That's fantastic.
I mean, and it's so necessary to bring this information directly to people. But I want to go back and make sure that people heard precisely the kind of path. This is Women's History Month, so to be able to understand Eloise Cobell's fearlessness and her pursuit of the credentials that society told her she needed in order to be able to chase down this settlement with the U.S. government, I think is profound. Because, after accusing her of not knowing how to read a statement, she got an accounting degree. Then she formed a bank, the Blackfeet National Bank, which, I really don't think people understand the significant. Exactly. Who does that? Not only you accuse me of not reading a statement, so not only am I going to get a degree, but I'm going to create a bank where the money that I know you owe me should be deposited once we get that settled.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, that's just, it's profoundly beautiful. And again, this isn't information that we get about this, what it takes to chase down something that is rightfully yours and to feel vindicated in everything, that all the sacrifices that you make and that the elders before you made in order for you to be able to get to that point.
That's right. She always told me, even in those times when it was tough for her, you know, they removed Judge Lambert from the case, and it was devastating. And she always told me, Melinda, I know I'm doing the right thing. The stars are aligned. The stars are aligned for Indian people to get justice. And every time she said that, I believed her. Mm-hmm. And you know, who do I know that would sue the most powerful government in the world? And she comes from an impoverished reservation.
Yeah. And the importance of timing with this, of course, because she has since passed on. Do you think about you know, the fact that you were looking to tell a story, you uncovered this, and you got a chance to gather this information and spend time with this important historical figure before her time on Earth was done?
Oh, I can't even talk about that, really. I'm so honored. I'm so honored because she was not only my main character in my film, but she was also a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. She knew my family. I knew her family. So it was a very, very tough blow when she passed. And I am just so honored that she allowed me to tell her story, that I was the only one that was following her. And, you know, when I first started on this film, I thought I just wanted to tell this story as an advocacy piece, because I knew that most Americans had never heard of this injustice. And yet it's one of the largest lawsuits in the history of our government, yet most people were clueless.
Yeah.
So I just started out, and, you know, I'm like, really? Is she going to be able to beat the government? Is she going to be able to get justice for over a century of malfeasance? But that was before I really met Eloise, and then I realized once I met her.
Yes,
it's like Senator Dorgan, who was in my film, said, if you're ever going to take on an adversary, you don't want to pick Eloise Cobell.
Right.
And that was the way that people described her. She was unstoppable.
Yeah, she was drawing on a great reservoir of power. Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, I love to see when she goes to the ridge and discusses that how much injustice her people have incurred, you know, through this, and it's great that you have brought this film to the finish line, that we can all see it and experience it, and also it serves as a great counter narrative to the mainstream belief that Indians have their justice because they own all the casinos or whatever.
Right, right.
You know.
Well, that was what I call the double injustice, because wherever I went with this film, I would talk to people, and I would ask them if they knew anything about the Cobell case. And they said, no, that's terrible. But boy, aren't these Indians all rich now? Mm-hmm. And I even had a lawyer say to me, oh, you know, they should just give them another casino. Like, that would rectify everything. Mm-hmm. And it just incensed me because, you know, there's a very small minority of the tribes. There's like, I think 583 or 63 tribes, and there's a very small minority of that are making money off of gaming. And even those tribes are they're sharing the profits with those tribes that are remote, mm-hmm. and don't have that means to bring themselves out of poverty. So they're helping them build roads and put in water supplies. So, you know, there's so little education out there about this. And that's why I call it a double injustice.
Right. Now, we appreciate your vigilance. Now, for people who, you can stream it for free now if you're online. You can go to pbs.org and look for it, 100 Years. And then beginning next week, it starts on Netflix. But if we want to own a copy, or if we want to follow up with other things that you're doing, where can we find you?
Well, you can, the website is 100yearsthemovie.com, mm-hmm. and there's a tab for educational sales. on our website, and there's also all of my contact information. So if you're interested in a copy for your own personal use, you can contact me, and if it's for educational use, just go to the video project, is the company we're working with, and it's on the website.
So librarians, you heard that.
That's right.
Let's get that. Let's get that.
Teachers, I mean, it's so important for us to understand that this is American history, and this is not what is readily offered in our classroom. So you have given us a tool to be able to view and understand and discuss this history in a way that we have not been able to get broadly based in our U.S. education system. So we thank you for that, and we hope that this film experiences huge viewership and financial support for those people who want to have it in their collections. And we look forward to what you'll be offering us next.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on your show. And yeah, by the way, with the curriculum, there is a 76-page curriculum with the film for the educational.
Beautiful.
So I'm very proud of that.
Well, we appreciate you, Melinda Janko. Thank you for joining us on the air.
Thank you, Stephanie. Bye-bye.
And again, ladies and gentlemen, the website is 100, the number 100, yearsthefilm.com. For those of you who are teachers or administrators with educational programs, see how you can bring this film into your space, teach this history, discuss this with the next generation. Quick break, and when we come back, we'll be checking in with Christy Henderson of Color of Change's Hollywood Project on the incredible success of A Wrinkle in Time, Black Panther, and what's next for inclusionary writers, and what difference that can make in our industry if people are really applying that principle to how these films get made. And that for the conclusion of today's edition of Real Black Radio. Hang tight. Of the universe, anybody who gets Sade to come out of retirement to record a song for your film gets 2 massive thumbs up in my book. And everybody knows that we here on Real Black Radio and at Word Radio are huge fans of Ava DuVernay.
Absolutely.
Anywho.
Absolutely.
So the fact that this film and see, Mike, you haven't seen it. I can't believe
I'm sorry. Look, Ava, everybody, I apologize. I overslept on Sunday morning and I have not gotten out this week to see it, but I will make it. Oh, stop it, Troy. And I want to pay my own cash money to go see it. So,
yes.
But yeah, shout out. Now, I still hold, it's a beautiful song, Sade, but I still hold she wrote all of her songs in 1987, and she recorded them all.
They are all in the same key. She recorded all
the songs, the same
They're long, all in the same key.
3-week marathon session, and she's just doling them out. So when she got the phone call, she's like, oh, yes, I have the perfect song for you.
But I got to tell you that as much as I fought, I said I wasn't going to cry, and I didn't cry in the movie. But the way they used it, she didn't save it for the final credits. Okay. I will say that. And the way that they used it in the film almost got me, Mike.
Okay.
It almost got me.
You didn't cry?
No, I didn't. I didn't. But we have joining us on the line to help us conclude today's program, Christy Henderson, the director of Color of Change's Hollywood Project. And Christy, we're overdue to talk about Black Panther, but it ended up working out anyway because now we get to talk about both.
Absolutely. We're always right on time. It's great to hear from you.
Indeed. Well, we're glad to have you with us because I got to ask what it's like on the West Coast now to have Black Panther eclipse the $1 billion mark within its first month of release and have A Wrinkle in Time coming on the heels of that success.
Oh, my goodness. I think it's just a Black joy moment for all of us. Everywhere we go, we have the opportunity to continue celebrating. And I don't know when we've felt this good before. I mean, number 1 and 2 at the box office.
Yes.
Yesterday I was in Austin, Texas, speaking for South by Southwest, and literally every time I open a panel, we just have to have a moment of silence for Wakanda and Wrinkle in Time. So we've been on a true ride.
Have you been greeting other Black folks with the crossed arms?
What? Not only greeting, but I can't stop texting. So the emoji that has the cross arms,
yes,
that was evidently something else when it was first created, and now it's Wakanda Forever.
Yes.
Has just been on constant repeat.
Well, I'm glad to know that you're feeling the same thing that we're feeling here. And one of the things that I think is beautiful that we've been talking about here in Philadelphia is how multi-generational the appeal is. People who are not comic book readers, people who are not generally into the whole superhero genre, everybody who has gone to see Black Panther has felt a connection to the story, and I think that is what has propelled it to, you know, 1 billion plus, and what makes it remain on people's lips.
Absolutely. I mean, well, you're speaking to me. I'm not the superhero person at all. Didn't necessarily follow Marvel Comics. Of course, I knew about it from what we do, but I wouldn't necessarily say I was the first one in line to buy a ticket. However, for Black Panther, I was the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, 5,000th person in line buying as many tickets as possible. So it's been not only a film, but it is an experience and a moment for everyone. And you see it from the conversations around your dinner tables to the conversations with our young Black boys and girls and just everyone. So it definitely has transcended the screen.
No, without question, it's a big cultural moment. I mean, I've been pushing Reelblack. We're in our 15th season now, and I've seen some false starts in a way. Like we were like, okay, we got to hype up this movie because it costs. Like Red Tails was one where we were like, oh, everybody go see this, and then it's sort of like, oh, maybe not, but. You know, this was a legit experience, a lot of fun. And Wrinkle in Time, the same thing. So back to back, and now we got the Avengers Infinity Wars coming in April, and folks are inking their deals now. You got Native Son is finally being made.
Creed 2 is in production. Ava
DuVernay just announced that she's doing another comic book adaptation for Warner Brothers in DC called The New Gods. Ama Asante just announced $1 Billion Spy. I mean, is this a big change the moment, or do we need to get more of these independent films? I know Nija Makwan, who did who was on with her Indiegogo for Jin. She just won the screenwriting award and signed with a big talent agency. So we're definitely big things are happening. Is this a big turning point, do you see, or is this just a tipping point?
You know what? I think that, and you know, we want to throw in Boots Riley. Sorry.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes,
sorry.
Sundance. The Horizon too. I mean, just the list goes on and on and on. I think that we are in. It's a new Black renaissance. I mean, I don't think it just sits in the entertainment community. It's happening politically. It's happening all over in our space. And so when I look at what's going on and what does this mean, I'm very hopeful that this is a turning point. And that we will keep this progression going, more of an evolution than a revolution.
I love it.
So I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited to see what's to come. It's a bit different than the kind of Black Renaissance moment that was happening in the 2000s and the 90s. I think that we're actually writing and creating the scripts and telling Black stories a little bit differently than we were before, and we're building on all of the progress that we've made throughout the years.
Well, I mean, that's encouraging to know. And one more name that we didn't mention that also has local ties is Erica Alexander, who has been, who has been bunkered in out your way, Christy. And the fact that she's now going to be developing films based on comic books. But, we all got a refresher for some or introduced by others to this term inclusionary writer. That Michael B. Jordan has spoken up and said that he is now going to insist upon them being involved in the projects that he's working on. Do you think, in addition to the fact that we've got all of these things in production, that there's a new awareness, a renaissance happening around film, that inclusionary writers are now going to help push the next wave of filmmakers and Black stories to be told on screen?
I am hopeful. Listen, I'm a Black woman in America.
Right.
I've heard a lot and seen a lot of that not come to fruition. I am excited about the inclusion rider. We know it's not new, but we know that it's necessary. And so as, we have the conversations and discuss what does success look like for this inclusion rider, I think we have to be very vigilant about holding race in the conversation, because oftentimes when we look at diversity and non-discrimination policies, it often centers on gender more than anything else, and the conversation around Black people gets pushed to the back of the bus, no pun intended. And I think we have to be very careful not to allow that to happen with the inclusion rider and all that we see that's going on now. I also think that it's important to flag that this work can't be done by us alone.
Right.
And so our white allies, our straight white men who are in every meeting, making every decision, inking every deal, are going to have to look around and say, uh-oh, there are not enough brown faces in this room. There are not enough women in the room, and invite us in. Even if we're knocking down the door, trying to come in through the window, they've got to help us get in there. So I'm excited, and I am very hopeful about the new buzz around inclusion riders, and I think that it's necessary. I just want us to all hold each other and the networks and the studios and our content creators, our showrunners accountable for really making that happen.
I love it. Well, we thank you for joining us. It's always a good time. You know, your family. I was talking to Rashad in the first hour of today's program. So I'm like, Color of Change always has an open invitation to join us and make sure that we're keeping our eyes focused on some of the important issues as it relates to our culture creation and social justice movements in the nation. And so we'll be reaching out to you again and hope that the wave continues to grow.
We equally appreciate you guys. Keep up the great work, and thank you so much. Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever. And Mike, we'll give you the last word, especially because we're not going to have you on next week.
Yeah, I'm off next week. So, well, just if you have the Netflix, if you have the code, you want to check out True to the Game with Columbus Short. We talked about it earlier. It was kind of dipped in the theaters a few weeks ago, and now it's on Netflix. Also, they have a series called On My Block, which I hear is quite good. And then next Friday is the release of Roxanne, the long-awaited Sundance hit about Roxanne Shante and hip-hop, and rest in peace, Craig Mack. And then also the big news, another person getting signed, Key and Peele have announced that they're going to reunite to do a stop-motion animation film for, I believe it's Netflix. Henry Selick is the animator. It's going to be the same person as Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh, nice.
So, Peele is writing the script, and he's working with Henry Selick, and it's going to be Key and Peele back together again.
Cool. Well, you know, I want to say that, you know, we love this segment, and I always run into people on the street who are like, I tune in every Friday.
Oh, that's what's up.
So we just got to let people know that the reason why Mike is not going to be rejoining us next Friday is because here at Word Radio, we are doing a day-long focus on violence. And so we're going to be talking to a lot of different people about various angles of how violence impacts our community, and we want to engage you in that topic. But we look forward to having you back at the end of the month
without question,
for us to continue talking about these wonderful Black stories that are now going to be told and distributed.
And I am mad at you. I mean, I want everybody to be safe, avoid the violence, but it gives me an opportunity to go to New York and check out that Gordon Parks exhibit before it closes. So, thank you so
all
much.
kinds of good stuff. So thank you for checking us out. Make sure you look for the video on all of Mike's channels and websites, and we will be back with Reelblack Radio on the 30th. Tune in next Friday at 10 a.m. for our TGIF edition of The Source, and speaking about our day-long focus here on Word Radio on violence. Brother Shamari's up next. Stay tuned.